Hello everyone and welcome to another Salesforce Ben webinar. I'm thrilled to be hosting today's session with Keepit on another essential topic for any organisation, disaster recovery in a data-driven world. In today's landscape where businesses rely on their data to drive decisions, manage operations and deliver exceptional customer experiences, a robust disaster recovery plan is no longer an option, it's a necessity. Data loss, integration risks, and slow recovery processes can not only disrupt operations, but also impact customer trust and overall business performance. Given that we are soon approaching 2025, a little too fast for my liking, but there we go. This session will lay out all the key priorities your org needs to take to be prepared for the new year, as well as practical ways to identify and address common system performance challenges. So, whether you're looking to refine your current disaster recovery strategy or are just beginning to think about the risks, this session will be packed with actionable insights that you can implement right away. To talk to you about this, we're really excited to have several members of the Keepit team with us today. So we've got Paul, Senior Director of Product Management, Bridget, Senior Product Manager, and Alyssa, Senior Director of Internal Systems. Together, they have a wealth of expertise and are looking forward to help you better prepare for 2025 and beyond. So feel free to put any comments that you might have for the team in the chat throughout, and we'll get to them later on. And for now, though, I will pass over to Bridget, Alyssa, and Paul to get started.
Thanks, Lauren.
Thanks, Lauren. I appreciate it. Hopefully everybody's having a good day. I'm excited to talk to you about data recovery and disaster recovery and how we can help you. One of the things I've realized is, today's organizations are facing increasing complexities managing Salesforce data. Data is ever growing. We have more integrations than ever, and data volumes just continue to expand. So including things like artificial intelligence as well. So ensuring data resilience and recoverability is a strategic priority really for everyone these days. These are some of the challenges that we hear from customers. Things like, we need to recover from a disaster. It isn't just about a backup, right? It's about ensuring your data is recoverable and it can minimize downtime to protect your business continuity. Our businesses need to move faster. Businesses require systems that enable rapid change without compromising data integrity. Access. If the systems go down, businesses want reassurance that they can access their data no matter what. Optimization. Again, data growth is inevitable and it can be really costly. So optimizing how data is stored is essential for balancing not only your cost, but efficiencies within your systems as well. And of course, we can't keep managing data like this. So this was a big one for me. I know I have felt this way many a times as a Salesforce admin in the past. The reality is managing data can create manual processes, which cause risks and errors, which can really impact your data integrity, both internally and externally. So all of these challenges aren't isolated, right? They're all interconnected. Addressing them holistically ensures your Salesforce data remains secure, accessible, and prepared to support growth and long-term success. I often hear people say, and actually Alyssa and I talked about this just last week, I often hear people refer to a disaster recovery plan like an insurance policy. And it certainly is, but in my view, it's also a lot more than that. It's a strategic priority in today's customer-driven world. Security threats are higher, and the risks are just greater than ever that you could potentially lose data. Even as you adopt AI tools, right, reliable data becomes essential for businesses. Ask yourself, what would happen if the critical data, like your accounts or contacts, was accidentally lost? Everyday risks like handling failed integrations or system glitches, those things happen all the time. But if they happen during peak operations, are you prepared to handle that? Finally, does your strategy ensure that data loss can be restored very quickly and accurately at the drop of a hat if something happens? I had a really good, I was looking not too long ago at Elements Cloud. They have org confessions. I think they're great. If you haven't checked them out, I would highly check them out. Some of them are really funny. One of the confessions that came up, number 177, it was a brand new admin started and they accidentally deleted 3 million records. As a result, they had to spend all weekend re-importing them before anyone noticed. The lesson? Always take a backup. It can help you in more ways than one. Losing this key data just causes major disruptions, not only for businesses, but for you as well.
Bridget makes a really good point, and one that I like to emphasize. I'm primarily a Microsoft 365 and Microsoft Intra guy. So what I know about Salesforce is right up there with what my cat knows about nuclear physics, which is not a hell of a lot, but I do know something about business continuity. And I like to give people a little thought experiment. I ask them to imagine that they've lost all of their critical business data. And critical in this case is going to vary depending on who you're talking to and what it is they do, what their company does. But so I'd like each of you to imagine, okay, you've had some kind of malfunction, disaster, attack, whatever risk you think is most likely in your environment, and you've lost important data. It might be your customer data, it might be your ordering or ERP data. It doesn't really matter what it is. But then imagine that a friendly genie shows up. I mean, it's Christmas, right? So let's say it's a ghost of Christmas future. And she hands you a USB stick and says, hey, good news. I've got all your data. Here it is. Is just having the data enough for you to be able to recover your business operations? Well, most of the time when I ask people this, they say, well, yeah, I think it would be. And then I ask them to change the terms of the experiment a little bit and say, okay, now imagine I gave you all that data on paper. Would that be enough to recover your business? And they kind of chuckle and go, no, dummy, of course not. Just having the data is absolutely necessary. You're never going to be able to restore your business to normal operations if you don't have the data that it needs to work. But there's so much more beyond the data that goes into an actual recovery. It's not just having the data, and it's not just putting the data back where it came from. In Salesforce, as you know, there are triggers, automated procedures, there are all kinds of things that need to run regularly on the data to transform it or to generate derived data that you need. How are you accounting for that? If you just put the data back, how does that account for the ability of your employees or your users to log in? What are you doing to make sure that your zero trust environment is preserved? There are all these pieces of a real recovery that come into play that go way beyond just, do I have a copy of my data and can I put it back where it came from? So I'd like you to keep that in mind as we continue on with the rest of the presentation and think about, what does recovery for your Salesforce environment look like, and which pieces of that plan or design go beyond just restoring data back to its original location?
Awesome. Thanks, Paul. Again, for a lot of businesses, Salesforce is the hub for your organization's most important data. If that data is lost or corrupted, it can seriously disrupt your business. These disruptions can affect everything from sales to customer service. That's why, even Salesforce recommends that you have a backup strategy in place. These regular backups ensure you can recover quickly and get back to work without missing a beat. A strong recovery plan can also help stay prepared and ensure that if anything goes wrong, you can keep moving forward very quickly. Alyssa, I know, again, we kind of talked last week a little bit about this topic. Do you want to mention anything about Salesforce and why they recommend you have a backup?
Yes. So, and just like Bridget said, and like Paul was saying as well, it's not so much about just having the data, right? And we're also talking about Salesforce data. So, customer information, contacts, opportunities, so transaction information as well of what you sold to a customer. We're also talking about your metadata in Salesforce. It's not just your data, it's your metadata. It's the entire way that your org is configured and built. So not having a backup for this, for me, as the internal director of systems at Keepit, I can tell you I would not sleep at night if I didn't have a backup. And in previous roles as well, where I've been head of Salesforce, head of systems, it's been the same situation. It was the first thing I implemented when I went to a new company, because it is so critical and it's so easy to make a mistake. And I think, just like we were saying as well, with various different ways that obviously things are being changed in Salesforce. So not only are people updating records, but integrations are updating records, mass updates are happening. All of this together, it might be working really well for a very long time, but it's just like you driving your car around for years and years and years. You've paid for insurance, nothing ever happens. And then as soon as something happens, you need to be able to move forward and do that quickly as well, right? You want to have a rental car ready to go so that you can keep moving on with your life. And it's the exact same situation for, Salesforce backup, right? So Salesforce, if you lose, like you said, that person lost 3 million records. I was just listening to that, like, oh my God, I couldn't even imagine. I mean, what if they couldn't get those records back? Right? Like, what if they couldn't get them back for some reason? And, it's great that there's the recycle bin in Salesforce and you can go and restore records, when you need to, but that's not always enough. And you definitely need to have something, off platform as well. I think is really important to have that separation. I know, Bridget and you and I talked about the sort of shared responsibility model, which is, common with a lot of cloud providers. And it's just that, you are responsible for your own data. Salesforce obviously provides the framework where you store all your information. And yes, they have their own servers and everything like that, but it's also up to you to make sure that your data is secure, in another facility. So I think it is really important. And it's something that I don't know of a lot of admins necessarily thinking about as a top priority, because I think a lot of times the data backup and recovery sort of sits maybe with IT or InfoSec and other organizations. So it's not always at the forefront of a Salesforce admin's mind, but it absolutely should be, because I can tell you, and I'll talk about it a little bit later from experience, how important having a data backup is.
Yep, absolutely. Well said. I am curious because you mentioned it. So I wanted to take a quick poll really quick and understand, does your organization currently have a disaster recovery plan specifically for Salesforce? Yes, you do, right? And it's very effective. B, yes, but it needs improvement. C, no, we rely on the Salesforce platform level features, such as their export features. D, no, but we know we need one. So I'm really curious. Again, Alyssa and I were kind of chatting, and I think the numbers are kind of outstanding. And I just still can't, it fathoms me that like 85 to 90% of customers still don't have a backup solution. That just is.
That is crazy to me. Yeah,
it really is.
Exactly. I am really looking forward to seeing the answers, because I think the answers are going to be different than we like. I think they're going to be, more shocking because it's not something that I hear a lot of people talking about. So it's something, that I think it's mainly the education side of it as well. And that's what, partially why we're doing the webinar, but I think it's one of those things that you don't always think about it. Right. And it's exactly like we said with car insurance, health insurance, travel insurance. You don't sort of think about it until you need it. And the moment you need it, you wish you had it. So I think that's the same thing with Salesforce backup. Obviously, it's on a much larger scale, especially when we're talking about, like you said, for example, 3 million records. I can't imagine if we deleted, for example, all of our opportunities out of our Salesforce.
Absolutely.
What would we do?
And then if you think about like related records.
Well, and that even goes, when you start talking about related records, start talking about CPQ, absolutely. Other programs that are, obviously on Salesforce as well. Certinia is obviously huge, and it uses loads of related records, and all of that, trying to restore that from a monthly export, I can't even imagine. So, I think it's one of those things that, a lot of people don't necessarily think about it, but something that we definitely want to promote that people should be thinking about and having a plan for us, moving into 2025.
Absolutely.
I think we can go to the next slide. Yeah, perfect.
So I wanted to talk about some common causes of Salesforce data disruptions, right? So first of all, data loss. Accidental deletions can happen all the time, not only just by users, but it's admins. All the time you're using data loader and tools like that to do mass updates, mass imports of records, mass deletes of records. This can cause major chaos in your system. And I know as a Salesforce admin, I would a lot of times do these data loads at night, right? At the end of the day, I had to do them when everybody was off the system. I'm tired. I'm dealing with mass spreadsheets, and errors can occur. Not only that, but oh my gosh, I forgot to turn off this workflow rule or process builder. I can't believe I said workflow rule, flow rule, or a flow. And it can change things in your org very, very quickly. And when that happens, you need to be able to revert it really fast. And trust me, I've actually done that. So I learned pretty quickly. I got a backup solution, and anytime I did mass data loads, I made sure I took a quick snapshot of all my backed up all my data before I performed those data loads. Alyssa, I think you also
and
with us.
Yeah, I had the same situation, or it was a very similar situation. I was very tired. It was, again, like you said, end of the day. I was trying to deactivate some users out of a sandbox so that we could put in some different users, and user IDs are the same across every org. So I had my production user IDs and I deactivated a bunch of people out of production because I connected through data loader to the wrong org. It's very easy to just not I think I'd connected to the right one, went to the screen, but then I had to go back and it automatically switched it back to production, and I didn't realize. You're moving quick, you're doing, like you said, it's any sort of thing like that, especially when you're doing mass uploads. Like, you're moving fast because you're like, oh, I know what I need to do. I need to just get this, this connected to this object and just run with it. But it's so easy to make a mistake. And I deactivated, I think it was 91 users out of production, which doesn't sound like a big deal, but everybody had shared reports with each other. And I lost all of that. When you deactivate a user, you lose all the shared reports. Thankfully, I had a backup, so I was able to restore that, and I was able to, get those people's reports shared again. But it's one of those things that, I was so thankful that I had it, and I hadn't had to use it up until that point. But having it there and being able to, restore that, because it was pretty quick. People were coming to me, hey, Alyssa, why can't I look at any of my reports? All these reports are missing for me, these dashboards. So I had to get that restored extremely quickly for my users. And that, from that moment on, I was always so thankful that I had a backup, and I would never work without one ever again after that. But it can happen on even worse levels, than just deactivating users out of production, mass updating data, like you said. And even if you're doing deployments, right? And I think we're going to talk about that in a few slides, but yeah, just anything that you're doing in Salesforce can potentially cause issues.
Which leads me to the next one, integrations, right? Integrations are awesome. And again, systems, as they're getting more advanced, we have more integrations. It provides, more automations. We can share work efficiencies. I mean, they're fabulous. However, they come with some major risks. A good example of this, in one of my old orgs, we actually had a marketing system integrated with our platform. We also had e-commerce integrated. The marketing system overwrote some of the emails, and then customers actually could not sign into their e-commerce system. Whoops. So when we found that out, I could quickly restore that data back to the original state, because trust me, we don't want to upset our customers with things like that. So simple mapping errors can cause these types of issues with your integrations. So you want to make sure that you're checking those things on a regular basis to ensure that you're not losing data. It also can be a big security risk, right? When something happens in one system, it impacts the other. So there's a whole chain reaction there. So again, taking these regular backups ensures that that you can get back to operational processes very quickly, and you don't have those as high risks. Alyssa, I'm not sure if we talked. You have some integration issues as well?
So I was going to say, it's not so much about as well, like sometimes you're in control of a lot of the systems. Like you said, you had a marketing system that overrode some of the customer emails. So you might be able to get in quickly as well and fix the issue, that's causing the integration issue with Salesforce. So you can restore the data, fix the issue, and you're good to go. But sometimes there's data that's coming from systems that are not run by your team, right? In a lot of my past organizations, we had SAP data coming into Salesforce, which was overriding our customer data in some instances because of various processes where the customer data would go out to SAP and then come back. And I wasn't in charge of that integration. So, if for some reason the team that, was doing it, maybe they made a change to their, in their sandbox environment and then deployed that to production in SAP, and their changes made an issue or caused an issue with our Salesforce data, then we're impacted, but we're also not in control of that system. So I think sometimes people don't always think about some of these risks, which I think is part of the reason we're here today. But it's so easy for another system to cause an issue with Salesforce, and to be able to quickly restore that information and restore that data to your Salesforce environment and carry on with your business as usual is so important.
Nice. Development's also a really big one. As Alyssa mentioned earlier, right? Metadata. Metadata is so important, and our systems are constantly evolving. We have configuration changes that we do all the time, and we're on a regular basis. A lot of times, you're moving projects from sandbox environments into production. This can cause issues not only with your metadata, but with your data as well. So it's really important to perform those backups before you deploy anything to a production environment. Let's say that you had a developer who accidentally deleted a crucial field, and it was also tied to different workflows or different flows. If that field accidentally got deleted, it can really stop processes across the business. So it's very important that anytime before you deploy something to production, that you take that quick snapshot of both your metadata and your data, so that if you need to roll back those changes, you can quickly do so.
Yeah, definitely. And I think as well, a lot of people still use change sets, right? And change sets override whatever's in production with whatever was in your sandbox. And I think as much as everybody would like to think that they work in a very strict manner when they do deployments, personally myself, having worked at multiple end user companies, it doesn't always happen, right? Things have to move quickly. People need changes in Salesforce. And if you are using change set still, which I think, again, similar to how many people are using backups, a lot of Salesforce admins are still using change sets. And that can pose problems when you do put something live if you didn't realize that maybe a change had been done either directly in production to that component or in a different sandbox and had been deployed to production after you'd taken your sandbox copy. These can all cause configuration problems and deployment problems. And without a backup, you sort of have to go back and untie, all the issues yourself, untangle all the issues yourself, which costs time, money. Your users might not be able to do, to complete transactions depending on what you've done. And that can really stop the business, which is obviously not what we want to do ever when we manage systems.
Right. Absolutely. So again, really just the foundation for disaster recovery is ensuring that you can protect your data, right? You've got to make sure that you can safeguard all of your business critical data that resides within Salesforce. You want to make sure you can recover it quickly. When something happens, you need to make sure that you don't have to rely on manual steps that can sometimes take hours and even days to fix, right? Time is money. So that fast recoverable process is very important. The other thing I want you to think about is going beyond Salesforce, right? We talked about integrated systems. Well, sometimes when you have other SaaS applications, you might want to also consider having those backed up as well. I would recommend you talk to your IT team or your security teams. Identify if there's other security or if there's any solutions that they're currently using to back up their Microsoft M365, Azure, Google, Jira even, right? You might want to work with them to also restore or to protect your Salesforce data. So I highly recommend that you look across your ecosystem to potentially back up your information. So just a quick recap, some essential tips here. Again, automated backups. Number one, if you are running that automated backup on a regular basis, you know that you have peace of mind, your data is secured. And guys, test your recovery plans. Even if you have one, are you testing it on a regular basis? If you're not, then more than likely, hopefully you can kind of set it and forget it. But in the event something happens, you need to make sure that you have the steps in place to recover quickly. So I think testing your plan is just as important. Monitoring and auditing, make sure that whatever tools you use, you can quickly look and see that your backups worked correctly, right? You got everything restored. There were no errors. Make sure that there's an audit log of everything that's been done in that backup. What's the status of it? Also, anomaly detection is very important these days. Let's say, for instance, all of a sudden you are getting notifications that there was mass changes to your records in your Salesforce solution, but nobody on your team has done any data load, so you're not sure what's going on. That anomaly detection can help you determine if there's a potential risk and help you fix it very quickly, right? Being proactive is so important, and it will help you help eliminate different headaches that you might come across. Again, scalability, right? You might want to consider going beyond just Salesforce. Make sure that you're protecting all your SaaS applications as well. All right, I'm going to turn it back over to Paul really quick so that he can talk a little bit about Keepit and what we bring to the table.
Yes, thank you. And that you saying my name has reattracted the cat. So give me 1 second to let him get out of the way. So one of the most important things that we offer at Keepit is that we provide a dedicated private cloud for your backup data. And a lot of times when I talk to customers and prospects, they get this sort of puzzled look and they wonder, why is it important? Well, it turns out that in the world we live in today, it's increasingly common for attackers to penetrate your on-premises environment and pivot to your cloud environment. We see that over and over again, to the point where Microsoft writes about it in their annual digital defense report. We've seen it happen to the US government. We've seen it happen to a number of other large entities that are well protected and have a lot of money to protect against this kind of thing. But just like in the spirit of old times, everybody knew in, let's say, 1965 or 1975 or 2005, everybody knew that when you made a backup, you didn't keep the backup in the same place as your production data. That was just good sense. If you made a backup and you put the tape in a tape rack down the hall in your data center and something physically happened to your data center, you wouldn't have access to the backup. In fact, most of you are probably familiar with Iron Mountain as an example of offsite storage. What you may not know is that Iron Mountain actually started in the 1950s before anybody except a very small number of organizations had computers, because they wanted to provide offsite business record storage in case of nuclear war for paper records. So we can go back, 70-ish years and see, okay, obviously what you need to do is take your records in whatever form they exist and protect them by putting them in an independent, physically separate location. Well, in the world of the cloud, what does that mean? It means don't back your Salesforce data up to another set of computers at Salesforce. Don't back your Microsoft 365 data up to another set of computers in a different physical data center building at Microsoft. That doesn't buy you as much protection as you might think, especially if those environments are linked. One of the other things I like to emphasize about Keepit is that if you walk into one of the data centers where we host our solution, we use Equinix as our worldwide data center provider. We use Dell as our worldwide hardware provider. So if you walk into a data center, stand in front of one of our equipment racks and put your palm on it, everything in our solution that you are not physically touching belongs to us and is created and controlled only by us. So the operating system we use, the object storage layer that sits on top of that, the web server that delivers the web front end that allows you to work with our software, all of that is optimized specifically for backing up SaaS applications. We're not trying to take a generic storage mechanism like an AWS S3 bucket or Azure Blob Storage and do a good job of making it act like reliable, immutable backup storage. So everything that we do, every line of code that we write is ours. There are no third-party providers. We have no GDPR subprocessors. We don't use any third-party tools in building our system. We host our own support system. So if you take your Salesforce data, for example, and you put it into our Zurich region, that data is only ever going to be held in Zurich. It will never go anywhere else. That's a huge advantage because we can guarantee that we've got multiple copies of your data physically distributed across multiple data centers in a region, but equally that your data is where an attacker can't get it and that it's locked or permanently homed in the region where you want it, making it very simple for you to prove that you meet whatever data sovereignty or go local requirements you may have. Okay, Bridget, next slide, please. As I mentioned, we've currently got data centers. And when I say data centers in a region, what I mean is we've got physically separate data centers in each of these areas with at least 2 data centers online per region. So in some of our regions, we have 3 or even 4. But in every region, we've got at least 2 physically separate data centers where in each data center, we keep 2 physically separate, fully replicated copies of your data. So you've always got at least 4 copies of your data across 2 physical sites where both sites, again, are independent and isolated away from your production data. That's been good enough to help us grow from nothing when we started in 2016 to protecting more than 10,000 customers in 74 countries. We're adding more all the time. So we just brought Switzerland online as a region. Early next year, I expect that we will light up a region in South America, probably in Brazil. And I don't want to announce anything, but I would say it's very likely you're going to see another 2 or 3 regions added next year. The reason we're able to do that so quickly is not because we use the public cloud, which is what most people assume. They say, oh, yeah, well, sure. It's no big deal for you to add a region because you just go into AWS console and you add a new availability zone. No, it's because we control the entire stack. And so bringing up a new region basically means we ship a bunch of equipment to an Equinix data center region. And we have a guy, I usually use this picture. We have a guy named Oscar who goes there to install the equipment and build out the data center. Then we deploy on it and boom, off we go. The other thing that I want to note on this slide real quick, that last bullet that says 8 workloads is pretty important. In this presentation, we're focusing on recovering Salesforce data because for many of you, Salesforce is the engine that lets you see what is your business doing? Who are you selling to? What are they buying? How is it going? What do your financials look like? But we recognize that different businesses have got different critical data. So we also protect Microsoft 365 and Google Workspace to make sure that your productivity data is protected, and Intra and some other ID management systems to make sure that your control plane is protected. So that's probably enough, me sort of gassing up Keepit as a platform. I think now Bridget and Alyssa want to tell you more about why Keepit's platform is the best choice for you to protect Salesforce.
Yep. So number one, it's easy to use. I can't tell you how important this is to me as a admin with a background as an admin. Again, I want to be able to set it and forget it. So anytime I have to go into the backup solution, I want to make sure that I can quickly find the information I need and restore it or perform whatever actions I need on that data. Scalability, right? Making sure that you have that long-term retention period, making sure that you can protect other SaaS applications as well. So that comprehensive coverage is important. Of course, security. Sometimes we forget about security, but GDPR compliance, all the different compliance regulations that are out there, right? It's really important to make sure that you have that tamper-proof and multi-replication through support across your data recovery. Predictable cost is also really important. So I was going to talk about this in a minute, but make sure that when you are looking at a SaaS application that there's not additional cost based off the size of your data or ingress and egress charges. Sometimes we forget about those types of things, but make sure that you're looking at something that has reliable costs without any additional charges. Unlimited storage and archiving, again, that's huge. And having that one platform for all your different SaaS workloads. So again, kind of as a wrap up, let's focus on some of these important steps that you can take to protect your Salesforce data. Really, you're trying to set your organization up for long-term success. Your role is the first line of defense, right? As a Salesforce professional, you're the architects of trust and innovation, building your systems that protect your data, that enable growth, and it safeguards your customer confidence. Make sure you're prioritizing your data resiliency, that you can recover quickly and accurately. Identify risks early, right? We talked about making sure that your integrations are properly running properly at all times. So make sure that you're catching those potential problems before they escalate. It's going to save you time and money and headaches in the long run. So that proactive management is very, very important. I said this many times, but I'm going to say it one more time. Think scalable. As your data and your businesses grow, your backup strategy should grow as well. So choose solutions that evolve with you, handling increased complexity while also staying effective. Extend your coverage beyond just Salesforce, right? Make sure that you're covering all of your SaaS ecosystem. And by investing in data protection, ultimately, you're not just preparing for the unexpected, you're empowering your organization to thrive in this ever-changing landscape that we live in today. Alyssa, Paul, do you guys have anything to add?
No, I think you covered it all pretty much, Bridget. But I would just say make sure that, as an admin, as a Salesforce architect, consultant, that you're thinking about this with your team or your customers, and you're acting as a partner, especially if you are, a consultant as well, that you're, working with your customers to educate them about the need for, disaster recovery. Because like we all said, you just, you don't expect to have to, you don't expect to need it, but the minute you need it, it becomes crucial. And obviously you can't go back in time and set a backup from, before the moment that you needed it. So it's one of those things that I think everybody should be thinking about in their plan for their, for their systems, especially, or even if you're not, director of the systems, or you're not the product owner, but you're an admin and you're managing Salesforce, you need to be speaking to your manager, to IT, to InfoSec within your company to understand what are they doing about data backup for other applications, and then how can you get Salesforce on the same or a strategy that works for Salesforce. But it's something that everybody needs to be thinking about, taking the business case to the right chain of command in their organization, and really have a plan for, as I think we see it all too often in the news, companies are getting hacked constantly, losing data. And I think this is just something that's going to keep, unfortunately, happening as, technology just becomes more and more prevalent. So it's something that everybody needs to have in their mind.
100%. I just want to throw in one last comment about the shared responsibility model, because this is a great example of how what political scientists would call the Overton window, kind of the range of acceptable discussion, has really changed. It used to be everybody just took it on faith that if you put data into a SaaS provider's cloud, that they would guarantee nothing bad would ever happen to it. And of course, what we found through experience is that wasn't really true. The discussion has broadened so that now both the SaaS providers, but also the customers, understand that shared responsibility model means your SaaS provider is going to try really hard not to lose all of your data or all of the data for all of their customers in a region at the same time. So if you think about the investments that Salesforce has made, or Google or Microsoft, or pick your vendor, those are optimized around delivering the best possible service quality to the largest possible number of people at once. They're not optimized for, oops, Paul did something stupid and accidentally ran an automation that removed a bunch of data that he wanted to keep. They're not optimized for, oops, Paul did something stupid and deleted this folder of documents that the board of directors needs for their meeting in the morning, right? That's not to say that the SaaS vendors cannot or will not help with those things, because case by case, different services having different rules, sometimes they can. But at the end of the day, the SaaS vendors are promising you a reliable infrastructure where their infrastructure does not just randomly throw away your data. Everything else is on you to provide. And that's what we do at Keepit.
Awesome. Very good point, Paul. Thank you. I think with that, we can open it up for questions.
Fab. Thank you so much for that. Yeah, that was a really, really insightful session. And I think that was a great sentiment to end the presentation section on, Paul. So thanks for that. I personally think that even if the audience didn't already know that disaster recovery and a backup strategy was really important, some of the horror stories you shared will hit that point home today, definitely. There's a few questions coming in, so we'll start here. But yeah, feel free to keep asking in the chat as we're going into this Q&A part. But so first question here that I've got is, what are the pros and cons of using the Salesforce weekly export for my backup needs? I know that you mentioned that briefly as one of the options, but yeah, what are your opinions on that?
I can answer that as a user. So I would say it's better than nothing as the positive. That's the only one. It's very difficult to actually restore your data. I mean, I have to be honest, Bridget, right? Let's be totally honest. It's why backup providers exist. It's good that you have a copy of your data. It's weekly. So, a lot changes in a week and a lot can happen in a week. So you're not getting the most up-to-date information. But if you have absolutely nothing, it's better than that. Cons, takes up too much space if you're storing it on your personal computer. There's very little security around that. I mean, what am I going to do? Take my laptop with me? And, what if it gets lost? What if it gets stolen? I travel a lot. Maybe it's in my bag and it gets stolen or something like that. And you just don't, that's not secure, right? So it's better than nothing. But yeah, there's too many cons to really list. But yeah, I would say, if you have nothing in place right now, go ahead and get started at least with the weekly exports. But definitely think about, a more scalable strategy moving forward.
Absolutely.
Yeah. And if you want to check out Keepit, the link is in the comments. So
Yes, please.
Here's another one here. Does the old 3-2-1 rule for backup still apply in a cloud world?
Oh man, I love 3-2-1 because it's very simple to explain to people. But that's a good question, because what 3-2-1 sort of expands into has changed. So in olden days, right, and I can say this because I'm old, there's no shame in it. In olden days, the 3-2-1 rule meant that you needed to have 3 copies of your data on 2 physical media types, one of which was offsite. So if you go back to the days of the high priests of mainframes, right, where you had a bunch of people in white coats and, data centers with glass windows and so on, what that meant was you had your production copy of data, you had a copy maybe on tape, maybe on disk, and you had another copy on tape, and that secondary tape copy was in a vault somewhere. Everybody, even if you're too young to have worked in IT during that era, everybody's, sort of familiar with that vibe. So in the cloud world, that didn't make any sense, right? How do you keep 3 copies of your data? Salesforce does not have a button anywhere that says, oh yeah, make an extra copy of my data for me, please. I mean, they kind of do, but not in a way that's useful for a backup and a restore, and definitely not in a way that lets you recover, as I talked about earlier. And 2 media types, I mean, what does that even mean now? Very few people use tape. Many of you probably haven't even seen an actual cartridge tape drive. So in a cloud world, we've redefined that. And this is not just a Keepit thing. You'll see this from every backup vendor and almost every storage vendor. People like Nutanix that don't do backup still talk about it this way. So you still want to have 3 copies of your data. So the production data itself in the live system, and then 2 additional copies. But the 2 is different. You want to have the 2 representing or standing for 2 physical and independent security boundaries. What do I mean by a security boundary? Well, if I take a book out of the library at Mark Benioff's house and I walk down the hall and I leave it on the counter in the kitchen, I'm still within the same security boundary of his house. And if the house catches on fire and that book burns, it's because it didn't leave that boundary. And we want to help people avoid that. So 2 in this case means, okay, great. It's great if you have 1 copy in your primary SaaS system, but you need to have another copy that is somewhere that is completely detached from that production system, like in Keepit. And then the 1 in this case, this is really important, and it's a fine distinction that a lot of people have not really thought through. The 1 in this case means at least one of those copies needs to be immutable. Why is that? Well, if you think about all of the times when you might need to do a restore, particularly for something like Salesforce or Microsoft Dynamics, you can say, all right, there are going to be many cases where I'm not as worried about immutability of data, because the data that I am restoring is not likely, or it is not probable that the attacker will modify it, because I'm not really worried about attacks. When I talk to Salesforce customers, nobody's worried about ransomware, right? There haven't been any commercial, I should say very carefully, there have not been any public disclosures of ransomware attacks that do things to hold Salesforce data at risk. Because when you think about it, what does it mean? You're going to have a piece of malware that gets in and encrypts a bunch of fields in Salesforce and then does what, right? But if you think about immutability from a standpoint of being able to prove integrity of data, chain of custody of data, the fact that your data that you're using to draw your financial results from, for example, has not been tampered with, and the ability to prove that, then suddenly immutability gets a lot more interesting. A fairly large number of Keepit customers depend on immutability, not just to guarantee that the data they restore is unchanged, but to be able to go back to a regulator and say, for example, well, let me show you the security policies in my live system. And they pull them up in their security policy management tool. This is allowed, this is allowed, this is not allowed. Then they can go into a Keepit backup and say, now let me show you what those policies were 6 months ago. This is allowed, this is allowed, this is not allowed. Let me go back a year. Let me go back 2 years. So you can show a continuity of data. You can show exactly what changed, when it changed, who changed it. So being able to use that data and very quickly compare versions across time, see how data has changed across time, is incredibly valuable for governance and compliance. We really didn't talk about that much, in this webinar, but 321 is the engine that not only gives you resilience because you can recover with confidence, it also gives you, I was going to say resilience of governance. It gives you the ability to go to a regulatory agency or to a judge and say, I can prove that what I'm telling you about my data is true because the platform that I store it in is only immutable. There's no way to make it not be immutable. It's not an option that you can turn off, right? I have 2 arms. I am never going to have 3. There is no way to turn me into a 3-armed being, although that extra arm would be awfully handy if I could type faster. Right? It's just not a thing. So that's what we think of as 321 in the modern world.
That was really helpful. Thanks, Paul. That was really clear as well. And don't worry, we won't tell Mark Benioff you've been in his house.
I was invited. Come on.
Hope you were invited. Hopefully.
Yeah, that'll be the day.
Fab. I think we've got time for another question here. So, do backup solutions normally require an extra skill set or an IT resource to help manage it?
So I'll take that one.
Yeah, sorry, I was gonna say I am the least technical person. I'm not the least technical person. I've gained a few skills here and there over the years, but I'm not a technical person in any stretch of the imagination. And I can just say confidently that I am confident not only with Keepit's solution that I use now, but I've used other ones in the past as well. And you don't need any special skill set to be able to use them. And if you do, they might not be the right solution for you.
Right. So even for those small, medium businesses, right, where you're as one admin and you don't necessarily have big support, don't let that stop you from looking at a backup solution, right? You can do it no matter what. So IT people or somebody more technical does not need to be involved.
Definitely. And I think some of the things Paul was talking about, are things that might not be familiar to Salesforce admins, definitely things that, weren't familiar to me prior to joining Keepit. And I'm still, I learn every single day. So I think that's also something to just keep in mind is that, there are these situations like Paul mentioned where like you might have to present this information to a regulatory body and you as a Salesforce admin wouldn't really have that experience or that knowledge, but having that backup provider that actually allows you to be able to do that, and you don't then feel like, okay, I don't have anything, I can't provide this information, or you're like scrambling trying to find the information. When you have a backup provider that can help you with that, it's a weight off your shoulders, gives you that peace of mind that we talked about, and that confidence as well. As the Salesforce admin, as the architect, as the sort of product owner within your organization, that Salesforce, is also compliant, just like all of your other, IT solutions.
Absolutely.
It used to be the case that every administrator was going to have disaster recovery or backup skills because that was the job, right? You had to be able to do everything from making a cable to installing a brand new server from scratch to running all the applications that are on top of it. As the world's gotten more complicated, we've seen a lot more specialization. So I could never do the jobs that Bridget and Alyssa do and that all of you do, because that's not my world, right? What I can tell you is this: you don't have to have special knowledge, but I want you to think about who's going to be mad and who are they going to be mad at if you have a data loss, either because of an attack or because of a mistake on your part, a mistake on Salesforce's part. The cause doesn't matter. Who is going to bear the brunt of the attention and scrutiny during the recovery? And ask yourself, if that's you, it's probably worth you investigating a solution, even if you're not directly responsible for providing that backup. because I see this time and again, especially at large enterprise customers. There's a team over here that does backup. There's a team over here that does directory and identity management. There's a team over here that does modern work, or whatever you want to call it. There's a finance and operations team. And those teams all are focused on the thing that they do for the business. The backup team is not thinking about, well, how am I going to back up Salesforce? That's the Salesforce team's problem. Same reason, the Salesforce team is not worried about how am I going to fix Lauren's printer when it breaks, right? Because that's not their job. So part of your job as a Salesforce administrator, I can almost guarantee, is going to be making sure that your Salesforce operations that are fed by the data are available when your business needs it. And that means, although you may not need a dedicated IT role or resource, you've got to get educated and comfortable to make sure that you know you can restore that data when you need it.
Yeah, and that's why this topic is so important for everyone. And I think that's a really great place to finish today. So thank you all for joining us. And a special thanks to Paul, Bridget, and Alyssa for sharing their expertise. Some great tips there that you can take into 2025 and beyond. Hopefully you've got a lot of actionable ideas. You're going to strengthen your disaster recovery, and we don't want to hear any more horror stories. So hopefully, fingers crossed. As always, a recording of this session will be available on the LinkedIn event page and on the Salesforce Ben YouTube channel if you'd like to revisit the discussion we've had today. Thank you everyone for joining, and take care. See you all soon. Bye-bye.
Thanks, everyone.
Bye.
Bye-bye. Bye.